It is time for Gilded Age, episode 7. Who wrote that letter? We're going to talk about it. Stay tuned. Hey, everybody. It is me, your girl, infamous Kiki, to do another episode of the HBO series Gilded Age. What do I do here? I go over the episode. So if you haven't watched the episode, spoiler alert, go watch the episode or come back here. If you just want to listen to the review and not watch the episode, that's fine as well. What I do is I take a deep dive into the story, into the historical aspects of the show. I will give you information that I promise you haven't heard at any podcast anywhere else. And I love history. I'm a student of history, and so sit back and enjoy the ride. So this is episode 7. Sorry you guys have been late. Things have been happening. In the description box, we'll also give you links to all the history stuff. So, and then so you can go back and look this things up for yourself. So the name of the episode is Irresistible Change. So we start out at the Russells. It looks like Mr. Russell's unveiling a new station. To me, it seems like it's Grand Central Station. They call it Union Station, but I think it's really patterned after Grand Central Station. Like I've said before in previous videos, that Mr. Russell is patterned after Jay Gould, and we won't get into it this video, but in the next episode, I think I'm going to devote some time to it because there's a lot of things here. So Larry, the Russell's son, tells his dad that he wants to be an architect, and apparently Stanford White, who was a real person, he helped design this Union Station. And so Mr. Russell didn't react too bad. He was shocked, but it seems like Mr. White was trying to smooth things over. So he tells Larry, we'll talk about it later. But yeah, Mr. White was trying to be like, yeah, he's going to use architecture to grow the business. And Larry was like, no. So, he like dry snitched himself. I was like, dang, Larry, you at least could have pretended, but he dry snitched himself. About Stanford White. Stanford White was actually part of an architectural firm. It was McKim, Mead, and White. So Charles McKim, William Mead, and Stanford White. They in 1879 their firm quickly rose to prominence. They were heavily inspired through European architecture and work. They traveled through Europe. Among their works are Pennsylvania Station, Columbia University Library, the Brooklyn Museum in New York, not to mention the Boston Public Library, a number of grand private homes in Newport, Rhode Island, and a renovation of the White House done in 1915. So how about that? So that's a little bit about the architecture. Now, there's another thing that I'm going to tell you, and I'm not going to take a deep dive, but Stanford White is known for a huge trial of the century scandal. Yes, a scandal. Yeah, spoiler alert. Mr. Stanford White was actually murdered in 1906 by this lady here by the name of Evelyn Nesbit. Very beautiful young lady. This, again, spoiler alert. At the age she began to have a relationship, I say that loosely, with Stanford White when he was in his 40s and she was 16 years old. Let that sink in. I learned about this scandal a long time ago. I read about it, but didn't put two to two together that this was the same Stanford White in the Gilded Age. But yes, he was having he actually groomed Evelyn Nesbit ever since she was a child. Like, there's evidence that he groomed her. It's horrible. Since she was a kid. So she, in turn, as she got older, started to see a railroad magnate by the name of Harry Kendall Thaw. And so it was like the love triangle of the century, and apparently there was some kind of plot to, or it popped off, and Stanford White actually got killed. So he got murked, y'all. Murked. And like I said, this is a whole story and a whole scandal, but Stanford White was a talented architect. But when it comes to his personal life, he had affairs. He was not a good person. So We'll dive more into that at a later video. But that's just a little bit. If you want to go out, I'll leave links. As like I said, and you'll know more about the horrible. It was a trial of the century about Stanford White and his proclivities. Let's put it that way. Anyway, let's carry. Anywho, carrying right along. After that, after I had to drop that bombshell, y'all. Sorry. So we get into the ants, and so the word has gotten out. Like I said in the last episode, that Miss Turner and Oscar were seen together. So of course, Aunt Agnes thinks that her son is having an affair, and it was hilarious because y'all, Ida was hip to the game, y'all. Ida was like, "This is what men do." You know, they have all kinds of women and kinds of affairs and everything. Ida was hip to the. Ida shocked me. She shocked Agnes too. Agnes was shook, like, what? But Ida is not so naive and a simpleton as she seemed. Like, don't let Miss Ida fool you. She was hip to the game. Also, we found out in this scene that Agnes is not talking to Bannister, so it's kind of like Bannister has to address Agnes, and then Ida has to answer. Like, she's still mad at him. I'm surprised he didn't get fired. That was my shock. But he's still employed. So I was like, oh my God, Bannister's still there, because I really like Bannister. So down below, the servants are wanting to find out who wrote the letter. So they're gossiping about who wrote the letter. Larian and Marion meet on the street, and Marion is out there walking Pumpkin. Y'all know how I feel about Pumpkin. Pumpkin a bad dog. But anyway, they're out for a walk, and they have a little talk about, you know, him being architecture, and his dad didn't take well. They keep bumping into each other here and there. I wonder where this is going to go. Anyway, meanwhile, back at the Russell servants, Thomas Edison is having this big unveiling where he's going to light up the New York Times building. And we'll talk about this later and get into the history of that. So stay tuned, everybody. And so Bertha wants to have, you know, they're going to sit in carriages and drink, and they kind of have like a dinner luncheon kind of thing. It's pretty swanky, pretty cool. And the servants are talking because they're getting prepared for this. And of course, Miss Turner is just snarky and rude as ever. And Mr. Church, the butler, like reads her again for filth because Miss Turner's always nasty, and I'm just like so sick of her. Then we go to Gladys. Gladys has Mrs. Astor's over, and Mrs. Astor's daughter over. I'm sorry I didn't catch her name. So Gladys is so Bertha walks in and talks about making her debut, and that makes Gladys, she seems excited and happy. And then they want to have something called a quadrille. And so Bertha's like, well, you know, you can't just have the kids here, because the quadrille they're having is just for like the kids, the teenagers, and the girls who are already out. And so Bertha's like, well, you know, you have to invite the parents too. So they invite the parents too to a quadrille. Now, let's go into the history of what is a quadrille. Okay, the quadrille is a dance that was fashionable in the late 1800s and 19th century in Europe and its colonies, and spread to America. It was performed by 4 couples in a rectangular formation. It was the precursor of American square dancing. So if you know American square dancing, then you swing your partner do-si-do. And then during these quadrilles, some of these quadrilles would have themes. So they would wear outlandish costumes. You see their outlandish costumes. And it was something that was very popular, in particular with the young people. Also, I have to mention and bring up something else. There was a Caribbean quadrille, like the servants and the enslaved people. They also, you know how black folks we do. We had to put our own spin on stuff. So they had their own kind of quadrilles. And here's a look of some of the images of that. That still goes on in the Caribbean today. So the quadrilles in the West Indies, Caribbeans, Trinidad, Tobago, and places like that, a lot of these dances were blended in with folk dances. And so they were related to the spirit of the ancestors. They were danced prior to weddings. They were danced during celebrations, and they were danced in couples in certain formations. And yeah, and then there was a whole like thing in St. Lucia in the Caribbean where there, the African Americans took, African drum beats and drums mixed in with the Latin America drum beats and everything, and they would form the music for their own quadrilles. So that's a little bit of information. Where else can you get information? I'm gonna tell y'all, where else can you get information about Caribbean quadrilles besides me? So I'm just putting it out there. I pat myself on the back for that one because I thought that was pretty darn interesting. Anywho, so Mr. Russell's having a meeting, I guess, with the lawyers and business people. They're talking about the train wreck. They're talking about a letter that he supposedly wrote, and they said it kind of looks like his handwriting, but there's no envelope with the letter, and the way the letter is written is like something he would say. However, he was like, I paid for these certain parts, so where's the money at? And so the man that he had billed this as accusing him and putting the blame on Mr. Russell, they apparently they can't find the money, so that is suspicious. So they're saying that there's going to be a hearing, that Mr. Russell could be charged with manslaughter if they find that he's negligent. If he's not negligent, then the blame will go on to the other guy. And so they tell Mr. Russell he better be ready. Mr. Russell's like, look, baby, I stay ready, big boss style. Meanwhile, back at the Van Rhymes, Marion comes home. Oscar storms out. She's like, hey, cousin, just like he wore out. And then apparently Miss Van Rhyme was yelling at Oscar. And so Agnes gives Marion the order to talk to Miss Russell because apparently people were, even the servants were gossiping, thinking that Oscar is having an affair with a lady's maid. So Marion's like, I don't know what I could do, what you want me to do, but I'll talk to her or whatever. So Marion agrees to talk to her. Meanwhile, back at the Russells, they're talking, and Mr. Russell's telling Bertha that he may go to prison, and she's worried about their reputation, and how this is going to ruin the McAllister's ball and the Edison thing. And again, he claps back at her like, woman, I could be going to jail. But apparently, she's not worried. Again, like I said in the last episode, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing or whatever. Anyway, so we move on to Peggy. She's with Mr. Fortune. They're discussing the electric ceremony, how that they want her, Mr. Fortune, who runs the black newspaper, wants Peggy to be there to interview people what they think about the new invention of electricity. This is what everybody's buzzing about. So they want Peggy to be there to interview people and do a write-up for the newspaper, which is good. Yay. Also in this part, they're talking about Thomas Edison and his filament, and it wouldn't be if it wasn't for Lewis Latimer. This is the wonderful Lewis Latimer. So Lewis Latimer received a patent in September 13th, 1881 for the electric lamp, an improved design for producing light using electricity, and another patent on January 17th, 1882 for the process of manufacturing carbons, which is an improved method for the production of carbon filaments for light bulbs. So really the longevity and the burn time of light bulbs was very, very short until Lewis Latimer created and patented the production of carbon filaments to make light bulbs last longer and burn brighter. So that's something that I did not know myself, but I found out. So that's some little Black history for you. Anyway, so Marion speaks to Bertha about Miss Turner. And then Bertha kind of tells her, they were going to have room for her, but they can't have room for her, that Mr. Rex is going to be there, and they needed to have more, same amount of men as women. They had too many women. And so basically Marion got left out, and she was just like, oh, okay. It was pretty bad. I felt kind of bad for her. I was like, girl, okay. Meanwhile, Bertha speaks to Miss Turner, and Bertha suspects when Marion told that Miss Turner was acting improperly, she didn't say who it was with. Bertha sees Miss Turner having a conversation with her son, and I think that Bertha thinks that maybe Miss Turner was seen with her son, because Marion didn't say who it was. She didn't say it was Oscar. She didn't say who it was. So Miss Turner comes in and helps her at night, brushes her hair or whatever, and she lets her go. She was just like, you know what, we not really getting along. And then Miss Turner kind of clapped back at her and snaps her a little bit. She's like, see, I told you. So she was like, girl, bye. And Miss Turner was out. She was like, you fired. And she was out in the cold, and just out there. Just bye, Miss Turner, bye. She out there with the garbage. um, so I was happy to see that. I mean, y'all know I don't like Miss Turner. She's scheming. Agnes is still mad at Bannister. They get a note saying that Mrs. Russell has indeed fired her lady's maid, Miss Turner. Miss Turner says goodbye to Mr. Russell again. She was throwing it at him again. Girl, she was throwing it at him again. She was like, you could have been with a woman like me, blah, blah, blah. Girl, you broke and she's like, well, I was in love with you and all this stuff. Girl, bye. I mean, oh, geez, that was a little bit too much. She was doing too much there. But anyway, so back to Marion and Mr. Race. They're at Miss Chamberlain's for lunch. They having little secret meetings there and everything. Marion told Mr. Rakes how she wished she could go, but she can't go. And then somebody named Sissy Bingham is going to be there instead. And she was like, well, I wish I could be there. Mr. Rakes was going to cancel. And she tells him, no, you ain't got to cancel. And Mr. Rakes put it on thick. He tells Marion he loves her. Why wait to get married? That they should hurry up and get married. That who cares? What other people think. Child. And then Miss Chamberlain steps in and was like, look, let me give y'all some advice. You really, if you want to step out against people and tradition and your families and society, your love has to be really strong, because all of this stuff that you're doing is going to cause you to drop down in a social situation, and you really have to be strong. Now, Miss Chamberlain said something very sweet, that her love was strong enough, that her and her husband had a love, and they were defiant, didn't care what happened. But she was saying that, I think Miss Chamberlain's kind of saying, well, look at her, she lonely now, But it was good when her husband was alive, but then once he died, then it was kind of it's been a different situation. It's been very lonely for her. So she was saying you have to be really, really strong, and really, 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 really in love. And so Mr. Rakes asked Marion, basically to elope, which means you go and secretly get married. So meanwhile, Mrs. Turner meets with Oscar and tells him, she's no longer his inside person. And Oscar was like, okay, bye, girl, whatever. She told him that Gladys is coming out soon. Meanwhile, at the Van Rhymes, the servants find out who wrote the letter. And Mr. Bannister just has a look on his face of like saying that revenge is a dish best served cold. So apparently they know who wrote the letter, and Mr. Bannister is planning something. Like he's planning something, and I don't know who wrote the letter. I don't know if it's Miss Armstrong. I don't know. It can't be. I can't be Miss Turner. Like I said, I didn't think it was her in the last video, and I still don't think it's her. But it was somebody wrote that letter. But we don't know who. But I guess we're gonna find out next episode. So then Larry and Mr. Russell are having a conversation about Larry wanting to be an architect, and he real talks his dad. Like he's telling his dad, you're brilliant, you're a genius. There's no way I can live up to being who you are, and then have the burden. Well, not the burden, but the weight and the stress of being able to take upon Mr. Russell's business and carry the family legacy and the business on, because he may tank the business. What if he's not good at business? What if that's not his thing? So Larry kind of feels trapped. He kind of feels trapped in his situation, and he is a banker now, but that's not his passion. That's his dad's passion. And he tells his dad, well, he's like, what about the company? And he tells his dad, well, you can leave it to other people. I should be able to forge my own path. And Mr. Russell was kind of taken aback at first, but you can see that he was kind of understanding. And Mr. Russell, he's all right dude. Like you can say that he just wants his kids to be happy. I wonder what kind of childhood he had. But again, when you're dealing with creating an empire and you're driven, and it's your dream, sometimes you have kids and it's not their dream. Like, there's no guarantees that this child is going to even manage the business correctly. He may run it down to the ground, and then the guilt of all of that. So yeah, I understand that he wants his son to take over the business, which I think would be the best thing. But then again, you know, he has to be cut out for that. And some people are just not cut out to follow in the footsteps of their parents. Um, so it gets to the night of the big Edison reveal, and Marion is there with the aunts, and then she finds out that Peggy is going. She's like, Peggy has to write an article for the newspaper. The aunts have no desire to go, especially Aunt Agnes. And so poor Marion is just stuck at home. I'm like, girl, I feel bad for her. She's just stuck at home, and you can tell the look in her face. She's worried about Mr. Rakes and who he's going to be sitting with and who he's going to be with. And girl, I'm worried too, girl. Okay, so now we get on to the Edison lighting up the New York Times building. This was a real event and a big thing. Here is the New York Times building, in a couple pictures of the New York Times building in the late 1800s. Because since today, the building has been remodeled and changed and added. But this is how it looked back then. So Edison lighting up the New York building in Park Row really happened. Edison flipped the switch, however, at Pearl Street, not in front of the building. There was a first power station was on Pearl Street in New York. It happened on September 4th, 1882 at 3 p.m. It did not happen in the evening or at night, but the producers of the show changed it to give it more of a dramatic effect at night. Thomas Edison and his taming and mastery of electricity was the greatest and most important technological advancement of the area. Some people didn't look forward to it. Some people did not want to have electricity in their homes, just like any other technology that we have today, whether it be telephones, cell phones, computers. There's always people who's going to be averse to change, and they're going to be the last one to get a phone, or last one to get a computer, last one to get Wi-Fi or whatever. But electricity really changed the game and everything. And like some of the servants were saying, well, this is going to put us out of business, because in back in the day, they had servants that would turn on that would light the lamps, the gas. They would even turn on the gas to light the ones. They had people that's specifically what they did, was just go around and light the candles in the house and make sure the house didn't burn down and everything like that. And but yeah, the servants dreaded the effect that it may have had on their jobs, which they should have, because it is going to be in effect. I mean, electricity wasn't widespread in homes and businesses for a while now. And then also at the end of the episode, you see the African Americans characters remark on, black people always get the short end of the stick. Like, we're always late getting the technological advances. It was expensive to have electricity in your home. Actually, when it comes to rural areas and poor people and a lot of black people, some of them didn't have central electricity until the 1930s. So there were a lot of black people, especially in the South, that lived in smaller towns, smaller rural towns, or just people that couldn't afford to have their whole house hooked up electricity, that did not get electricity until the 1930s. I know that my grandmother grew up in Mississippi, and she grew up in Mississippi in the 30s, and they had electricity in some spots of the house, but in some spots they did not. So that's my little anecdotal situation about that. Also, at the very end of the episode, you see the rich people that are in their carriages and they're dining, and that's how it went too. It was a big event, and you see Mr. Rakes talking to Sissy Bingham, and she's inviting him to something, and he's being nice. I don't know if Mr. Rakes is being nice just because he's trying to be polite and he's trying to get in with as many rich people as he can, but the look on Mrs. Fane's face struck me, that she had a look of sadness and a look of kind of like disgust, because she understood what was going on. I don't know, Mr. Rakes was serious about meeting with Sissy Bingham, because apparently Sissy Bingham has a lot of money, and then if she comes up again, there was a real life person that a real life Sissy Bingham, and she did have money and her family did have money. But the idea that Mr. Rakes can social climb, let's talk about this for just a brief thing before we end this video. What I found really striking is that men could come from nothing, Mr. Rakes was a lawyer. He still is a lawyer. So in those days, a lawyer didn't make a whole bunch of money. Like, he was like middle class. But Mr. Rakes is smoozing with all these rich debutantes, and he hanging out with these rich people, and he has rich clients, and they're inviting him to things. None of this would have happened if Mr. Rakes was a woman. If you're a woman and you were not born to money, 9 times out of 10, the only way that you could schmooze your way into high society is unless you're having an affair with somebody, you're entertaining somebody in some way. Somebody is maybe giving you some money, but then people still gonna look at you sideways, like, why is they giving you money? You know what I'm saying? You're still gonna look in societal wise as looked down upon. But I just find it just grinds my gears that the patriarchy was so strong, is that the fact that men can kind of move in and out, and it parallels down, I have to say, down to this day, that as a woman you have to be stellar, you have to be beautiful. And when I do YouTube videos, I have to be, you have to look good, and you have to be beautiful, and then you have to know what you're talking about, to be articulate, and be all these things to get people's attention. But then men can come out here and they will do their thing, and then people will take them seriously and like they know stuff. But it's like, seems like as a woman, in order to be taken more serious, you have to have it all. You have to have the looks, the charm, the grace, the personality, the connections. You have to have it all. And the fact that Mr. Rakes has the looks, has the charm, he has the grace and all that, and the fact that he is able to be in circles with people that are way above his station, and in the fact that he can even turn the head of women who have money, and the fact that he could smooth his way into Marion's life and any other woman's life, knowing darn well that he doesn't have any money. But if he marries into money, if he gets him a rich wife, that is more easily forgiven than a man marrying a woman who does not have status and money. So it's okay to marry some broke as a joke dude who don't really have anything, because you can kind of bring him along, or get him to go work for your dad, or give him to go work for this business. Or if Mr. Rakes would marry good, that would bring more people in his law practice, and it may elevate him in status. But as a woman, you don't have that opportunity to elevate in status. No matter how cunning, how attractive, you're always going to be looked at like Miss Chamberlain, like you're just lower than the low, like you're ill-born and you don't have no money, and why would a guy even marry her? Like, you have no value and you have no worth. So that kind of grinds my gears about the way society was back then. And even like, it's some parallels to society today, that you have to be superwoman in order to be considered successful, when there's a lot of mediocre men running around here. I'm just saying, I ain't trying to throw no shots at men, but there's a lot of mediocrity out here. And especially being a woman of color, then that's even twice, you have to work twice as hard to be proven that you are worthy to sit at the table, you are worthy to be around in certain circles, and you have to constantly prove yourself as a woman. So Women's Day was, a couple of days ago, so that's all I have to say. I'm gonna watch episode 7 tonight, and I'm gonna come back to you guys with another video. But that's about it, my lovelies. I am so glad you guys are watching. I'm so glad you guys watch my videos. Anyway, that's about it. You guys have a good day.